Afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our session, Becoming American Through Military Service, which explores military service, both uniformed and civilian, as a pathway to citizenship. My name is Melissa Ziobro, and I am the Specialist Professor of Public History at Monmouth University in West Long Branch, New Jersey. I'll be the moderator for this panel. I am joined today by Carol Fowler, the National Guard Militia Museum of New Jersey's Center for U.S. War Veterans Oral Histories Director and Assistant Curator, and Fred Carl, currently of the Princeton University Physics Department and the founder of the InfoAge Science and History Museums at the Camp Evans National Historic Landmark. We'll talk a little more about their impressive CVs in a little bit, but first I'd like to quickly recognize Carrie Giannotti. She is the museum director at the New Jersey Vietnam Veterans Memorial Foundation in Homedale. She had the idea for the panel, but then had to drop out due to scheduling conflicts. We thank her for initiating the idea for this session, though. Carrie's departure from the panel means that our two speakers have a little extra time to present themselves. And I know you are going to be just enthralled by the stories that they have to share. So let's get to it. First up, we have Carol Fowler, who, as I noted, is the National Guard Militia Museum of New Jersey, Center for U.S. War Veterans Oral History Director. She's also the museum's assistant curator. Carol was born in Hudson County and is a graduate of the College of St. Elizabeth. After having a family, she returned to Brookdale Community College to take history courses and ended up doing work as an associate producer of the college television show titled Triumphant Spirit, America's World War II Generation Speaks. She then began conducting veteran interviews with her history mentor, Professor Paul Zygo, and his project, the Center for World War II Studies and Conflict Resolution. Carol was then hired to help establish an oral history program at the National Guard Militia Museum of New Jersey in 2001. Now, over the years, she has conducted over 600, I can never believe it when I say that number, over 600 interviews with veterans from World War II to present. She's been commended by the Library of Congress, Veterans History Project, and numerous other leaders and veterans organizations. So I could just go on and on, but let me not eat into her time anymore. It's all yours, Carol.
Thank you, Melissa. Okay, today's talk is called The Voices of Immigrant Veterans. So let me share my screen. Okay, put yourself in the shoes of someone from a foreign country, someone from another culture, another society, and imagine as a young person, you're leaving all that you knew and you're coming to this country and you're getting to that moment in your life where you find yourself signing on the dotted line and you're giving yourself over voluntarily in service to this country. And that is basically the theme of today's talk. So let's start with the name of my project, the Center for U.S. War Veterans Oral Histories. And it's here at the National Guard Militia Museum in Seagirt. This is our newer building for the last couple of years. My curator is Staff Sergeant Andrew Walker, and he's done quite a bit of work, so please come and visit us. And please see how great that grass got since our summer we had, and our beautiful mums that we have in there too. So today's immigrant veterans will be Staff Sergeant Flavia Burton and also Colonel Walter Alvarado. This is just the interior shot of the new museum, and you see the Civil War submarine, the intelligent whale there. And of course, there's so much more to see. Now we're up to Flavia Burton. There you have the basics of what the Veteran Oral Histories project is about here in Seagirt. And now let me feature my selected veterans for today's topic. Becoming an American military service, voices of immigrant veterans. First, let me present a female Marine, Flavia Burton. She enlisted in 2011 at the age of 19. She enlisted with the United States Marine Corps at the time of her graduation. She worked in supply and accounting, as well as with the global terror, as well as she's a global war terrorism veteran of the 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit which was aboard the USS Mesa Verde. And that's where she met and married another Marine and ultimately became a staff sergeant before leaving the Marine Corps to pursue her real license. You're about to hear this, tell her story in her own words. Let's stand out for you those phrases that speak to what was in her heart and how she came to find herself where she landed, both in this country and with her urge to help her community. And you may find that what stands out from her interview parallels with what will stand out in the next featured immigrant veteran. So let's try to identify which words she uses, which phrases, and which most exemplifies the spirit of an immigrant veteran and what makes them tick. So if you can, type them into the chat or jot them down. This will be a great way to come of this presentation. Through their own words, we'll see similarities and we'll learn from and be inspired by them. Thank you for your patience and watch.
I was born in the islands off the west coast of Africa called Cape Verde, and then I soon moved with my grandmother to Brazil, and then when I was 15, I came to the United States. And so when I moved to the United States, it was very hard, especially adapting to a new country, a new culture, that I felt a little bit separated from basically the society and the culture, and so nobody really understood me in that sense. And my mom was going through a hard time financially, and I wasn't doing well in school. So my friend that I used to work with at McDonald's was in the military. She seemed very happy, motivated, and she seemed like she belonged to an organization that cared. That made me study more about, the military here in the United States. And I went to the recruiting station, and the first person I saw in the uniform that I fell in love with was the Marines. And I asked him, "Can you tell me about the branch?" And he basically brought me into his office, put this video, and it was so motivating. And it seemed like it was hard, but in my mindset, if I could, come to the United States, and basically try to pursue a dream, why not make it challenging and see how far I can go? And so that's what intrigued me to join the military, because going through a hard background, struggling financially and trying to make it better for my family. So I joined the Marines to make it better for me and for my family, which it has, and it's been the best decision I ever did. And I really appreciate everything that, my brothers and sisters has helped me. And I grew up and matured so much from it. Being in the background with where all of my family members only spoke Portuguese and lived in the United States, they weren't very knowledgeable about the military and all of the government system and the setups. It's amazing that I go to school right now. I go to Pace University, and I was telling a student about myself, and then he came up to me with his eyes filled with tears and saying, "Thank you for your service," because his dad was in the building at 9/11, and he didn't make it out. And I got so emotional. I was like, "Oh my gosh, you know what? This is what I do. This is why I did it. I did it to basically make a difference, even though I wasn't aware of what the current event that was going on when I joined. But I'm the type of person that I want to, make a difference and help people." I would do boot camp all over again.
Really?
Yeah,
I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that.
yeah, I would do it.
Why do you say that?
It's the experience that nobody. The thing is that I went there with such like an open mind, and the struggle and the things that I went through made me who I am now. I think, like a lot of people could argue that, but I became. It made me see a world in a more different perspective. So me coming from another country, I saw the world in a different perspective. Me going through boot camp made me see the world in a whole different perspective, and it changed me. And thinking back, it was like it was the hardest experience because I overcame the biggest challenge that a person could ever overcome. But I would do it again because I want to feel that feeling again. But it made me more wiser, like what's to come, in my military career. Yeah. So I guess like that was like, okay, you're gonna encounter, people that's gonna be, biased in some sense, but you just
Against
gotta,
your gender?
yeah, like something like that against my gender. That's you can't let that get to your head. You just gotta brush it off and just be better than them. I felt alone, but
Right.
but I basically had to tell myself I need to be better than them. So I dedicated my days to training, PTing, reading knowledge about the Marine Corps and everything.
Mm-hmm.
That I accelerated faster than them. I was like 19-year-old, only only lived in the U.S. for like 4 years. I didn't know what to expect, so I was just letting, everything, come to me and accepting it. And I guess that's what made me stronger and determined. My staff in COIC, she was a female Marine, and she basically saw my potential, and she pushed me, and that's what I guess that what made me see like, wow, like I'm actually good at being a Marine. She made me see that, and so that's when she told me like, you should deploy. You should basically explore, what the Marine Corps has to offer. So she hooked me up with the deployment, which was as six. And I kind of felt like weird telling Marines that I'm a 6 years Marine that's a staff sergeant, because they usually think like I've been in for 12 years or something like that. But yeah, so I had, I think, about 36 Marines under me, and basically I trained and led them. I did a lot of Lance Corporal seminars. I was the instructor, and I was also the chief of the course. So. I would have to say that being an instructor as a Lance Corporal seminar, teaching to young Marines, that was my favorite job.
Why?
Because I wanted to be the person to inspire them. To how like in your lifetime you will have that one person that you remember. Mm-hmm. I wanted to be that one person that they remember, that they look up to, that they like, this is the reason why I do it this way. And so being an instructor, it gave me the opportunity to basically talk to them, share my experience with them, teach them leadership skills, teach them the ins and outs of, being a Marine and what you should do, the right thing to do. It gave me the opportunity to share that with them, and they liked that. At the end of the class, there was this one female Marine came up to me. She was like, "I finally have someone to look up to." I was like,
"Oh wow,
it's beautiful." I was like, "Really? Like, thank you so much."
Mm-hmm.
I still keep in contact with her sometimes.
Oh.
Yeah. She's a corporal now. So now I got out, and I'm a real estate agent.
Oh,
Yeah,
wonderful.
yeah. But the thing is, I specialize in helping veterans. I want to give back to the community. I want to help veterans. I want to help military members because I know the stress about moving. So the stress moving and finding a place and all of that, I understand what they go through because I went through.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the reasons why I got out because I didn't want to go through that again. So I want to help
I
them.
see.
Yeah. And that would make me pursue the real estate career to help others. And I also want to help the community. You know, one thing I realized about myself, I'm a giver. I like to give, you know, but I still want to be part and help and support.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I came from a girl that didn't know nothing about the military to basically giving my time and helping them because of you know of what the military has brought me up to. That you know I gotta get back, you know, because I understand the struggle. You know, I want to be like the cheerleader helping them. You know, I guess that's how you could say.
They're lucky to have you.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, I hope so. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that. All right. Combat veterans are eligible to be presented Quilts of Valor. It was our honor to include both Flavia Burton as well as another female veteran who was in the Gulf War Desert Storm. So here you see the Rebecca's Reels quilters from Middletown, New Jersey. And they were just so thrilled that day to present to women. It meant such a great amount. And of course to our veterans. Our other immigrant veteran to be featured here today is now retired Colonel Walter Alvarado. He was born in South America in the 60s. 21 years later, Second Lieutenant Alvarado was commissioned through ROTC, or it's the Army's Reserve Officers Training Corps, and he served a few years as a leader. He began his AGR career, Active Guard and Reserve. He is an Operation Enduring Freedom veteran of the Afghanistan War, and he deployed there as a battalion commander. He was the battalion commander of Task Force 50th PSP Personnel Support Battalion, and that consisted of 210 troops. They were in 4 countries and at least 70 locations in Afghanistan. While you watch him tell his significant memories and motivations, see if you can detect similarities with what you heard Flavia Burton say and her perspective on having served our country.
Back in '85, when I was a college student and I was serving, actually I joined ROTC so that I could serve my nation. Back then, I remember that President Reagan was the president of the United States. No, I was actually the first one. Now, I'm an immigrant from Ecuador. So, and my father came to this country back in 1968. So when I joined, I was actually the first to go to college and the first to join the military. And to do so as an officer was even a great accomplishment. It was when I was in college, I saw some of my fellow college mates who were cadets and they got to wear the uniform. It was just the first impression with the uniform. It was just a nice thing to see how they wore the uniform and how they had that regimental lifestyle, even though they were college students. So that was the first impression that I received, and I liked that. I wanted to be part of that. And that's when I quickly took ROTC and realized that I could actually serve my country by taking on the program and eventually getting commissioned as a lieutenant. there is no greater thrill than leading American men and women in the combat zone. So my favorite job was battalion commander in Afghanistan. It is the most demanding job, but at the same time the most rewarding job, in that what you're doing out there is the real thing. You are supporting soldiers that are actually fighting the enemy, fighting the bad guys. And the bad guys, obviously, in Afghanistan were the Al-Qaeda network and also the Taliban. And the people that you supported were those folks that were actually giving their lives, putting their lives at risk every single day to, again, fight that war. So when we did the job, we did it, obviously, knowing that we had soldiers to support, and we had a real easy philosophy that we live by every single day, which is what we're prepared to give the shirts off our backs and the boots off our feet to our fellow soldiers to make sure. So I think that finally, I think America itself embraced the military because they knew now that they needed the military more than ever before to bring that security back home. Back then, after 9/11, I think most of America lived in fear. We did not know when the next attack would be. As long as the fight was overseas in the fields of Afghanistan, it was not going to take place here in the fields of America. So it was just restoring that confidence back in America. The fighting force did not change immediately, but it changed gradually. What we saw, as soon as 9/11 hit, again, I was in recruiting retention, is that we started getting a lot of calls. But it was surprisingly wasn't the young folks, the 18, 19, 20-year-olds that we wanted to bring in. It was the older folks who had served in Vietnam, who were 65, 70 years old, wanting to join. Appreciate what they wanted to do, but it wasn't what we were looking for. But nonetheless, though, the fact is that they had called, but they were also, it was an automatic, almost instant, we had a lot of advertising, free advertising, and that's what the military is about. We advertise our services. And having 9/11 happen and having to see the soldiers deploying, soldiers at the airport, soldiers serving in Afghanistan, it was that patriotism and willingness from the American people to support and serve America that we were able to eventually get into those 18, 19-year-old kids so they could make a difference in our armed forces. So over the last several years, you have seen since 9/11 that our forces got a little bit younger. And those same soldiers that we got 5, 6 years ago are the same ones that eventually did deploy into Iraq, into Afghanistan, and who are now the backbones of our organization, who are now the young leaders, and those who will make a difference in the future. As a leader, and one that was going to take a baton overseas, it was one that accepted it with great pride in knowing that I was going to be able to make a difference. One thing you want to do as a leader and as a battalion commander is that you want to take your organization into a combat zone and make an impact, make a difference in the way you provide those services that we provide, and at the same time take these young soldiers that we had that I mentioned before and be able to make an impact immediately, and to be able to bring that element to the combat zone, which was necessary, which is that positive attitude and that willingness to serve, and we did that as an organization. The bigger picture is that these guys gave their lives for a bigger cause, which is democracy, and realize that we're bringing something new to the people of Afghanistan, bringing to them democracy and the rule of the people so that they can choose for themselves their system of government. And we hope that that eventually is going to be able to basically sprout throughout that region so that other people of the world can also see and benefit from democracy. So it has a direct impact on how we live our lives here, and that we know about democracy. We, the people of America, we take it for granted in that we think everybody in the world has what we have, which is freedom. And we also have the economic luxury to go buy whatever we want. But when you go overseas, you see that it's not the case for the rest of the world. And it's by ensuring that my life is going to be one that's going to continue to do what's best for this nation so that we can bring our cause overseas. And I have to serve again, I'll do it again, so that we can make sure that the people of all the worlds, they can benefit from what we benefit from, and that's the freedoms that we have in this country. The Afghan people have seen and been in a war status for 2,000 years. They do not know what it is to live in peace. They do not know what it is to not live with an occupation force, whether it be the Americans or the Russians or Genghis Khan, okay, being in their country. They don't know what it is to have a country that's ruled by them, a country that is policed by them. They don't know what it is. They've always seen a foreign occupation force on their soil for 2,000 years. So what is their attitude? An attitude is this is business as usual. If it's not the Americans, it'll be somebody else. So that's what we try to convince them that no, we're the real thing. We're going to make a difference for you. And eventually, it's not going to be the Americans. It's going to be the Afghans taking care of yourselves. So what's the attitude? It's a wait-and-see attitude. It's nothing new for them to see a foreign occupation force. When I was there, they looked at me as a foreign occupier. Sitting with the soldiers, we said a little prayer, then I thanked them for their service, thanked them for the sacrifice, and let them know that they were making history. They were making part of American history. That someday, 20, 30 years from now, their sacrifice will actually be fruitful in that we're going to see a better world. And I tell them that please do not forget that what they're doing was something good for our nation, doing something good for the world. In my heart, I said I could be with my family or I could be with my soldiers, and I realized that then the soldiers there were my family.
Right.
And we were all family, a big family together. So it just realizes that some sacrifices are worth it, and that's when we realized that our sacrifice was absolutely worth it. Like I told them for the whole 12 months, your legacy is what you got to work on your legacy. And they know that the legacy now is one that was a good legacy, one that's built on the principles of sound military principles such as, serve with pride, serve with dignity, and then come back to your loved ones as heroes. And I think that they appreciate that.
Okay. So we watched some highlight clips from Colonel Alvarado's oral history, and we're taking notes of which words and phrases that he said and exemplify the motivations and most valued accomplishments for an immigrant veteran particularly. So now we have a great sense of the mindsets of each and who they developed into and when they came out of the other side of their military service for the United States. At this time, I would say, let's have a discussion. And the best way to honor their veteran oral histories is to have some feedback, and let's talk about what we saw with their motivations when they were young and they went into the military and how they felt when they came back.
Well, thank you so much, Carol. I love that, less than 1% of the American population has served in the military, right? And you were able to use your time to share stories from veterans in their own words who immigrated to this country and then chose to serve when so few do. So as Carol said, if you'd like, in the Q&A box, because I don't think you can get into the chat box, in the Q&A box, go ahead and just type a few of the words and or themes that you noticed reoccurred across both of the interviews and the commonalities amongst the interviews. While they're taking a moment to start typing, Carol, I will note, they talk about wanting to serve. I was particularly struck with the first veteran, the Marine that we heard from, how prior to her service, she talked about life being hard, trying to adapt to a new culture, how she felt separated, how nobody understood her. These are from my notes. And then she joins the military, and not only does she adapt and find a place, feel at home, she then becomes a leader. And I was so struck by that.
Yes, thank you so much for saying that. My most memorable part of that oral history was that she was working at McDonald's and she saw one of her coworkers doing something that included feeling dignified, and also, the financial struggles her family had. And She wanted some of that for herself, even though only 4 years here in the United States.
Okay. Any other common themes that our audience noted? I'm not seeing any pop up right away. So why don't we do this? We're going to pause here on Carol's. We're going to transition to Fred's. And then at the end, we'll have time for some questions for both of our speakers. Okay. So again, thank you so much, Carol. It was fascinating to hear from these folks in their own words. I think that's so important. Next up, we have Fred Carl. Fred is with the Princeton University Physics Department as one of over 200 scientists in 40 universities working to build a series of telescopes to be deployed in Chile to gather more data about the cosmic microwave background. Fred was born and raised in Monmouth County. He received a BS in science education and an MS in computer science from Monmouth University. He also has teaching certificates in comprehensive science and computer science. You might be thinking, what is Fred doing at a history conference then? Well, Fred began the effort to save Camp Evans by transforming it into a science education center in March of 1993. He filed an application to create a 37-acre Camp Evans historic district in Wall Township in Monmouth County and have it listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Not only was he successful, in 2012, the site was declared a National Historic Landmark. Today, the InfoAge Science History Center has 7 museums, an archive, and a library. Fred has won numerous awards, including the M. Claire French Award for Leadership in Historic Preservation and Preservation New Jersey's Sarah B. Fisk Legacy Award, which is a lifetime achievement award recognizing important and sustained contributions to the understanding and promotion of historic preservation and history in New Jersey. Fred is going to tell us about the little-known Project Paperclip scientists who came to the United States from Germany following World War II. Fred, it's all yours.
Thank you, Melissa. I am so glad to be here. Can everyone see my screen? And there we go, slideshow from the beginning. All right. These folks came to military service a little different than Carol's. They weren't in their native country or a country they had selected to come to. They sort of took advantage of an opportunity. So let's give it a look. First of all, myself and Melissa, we come from the InfoAge Science History Center, which is a wonderful place in Wall, New Jersey that has an amazing history. And that's another hour and a half. Our goal and what we've done is we've created 7 funzeums. We have a platform where organizations can touch informal science and meet school children more cost effectively over a longer time when they make donations. We have memorials. I'll talk about one of them, a Hall of Fame. We've created an archive and libraries. And jokingly, we just do electrons and waves. We don't have anything alive that we have to water and feed. They're safer that way. The site started in 1912 as a Marconi station catching waves from Carnarvon whales, and it was part of Marconi's wireless girdle around the Earth, which in the early 19 teens was a technological marvel. And then the same property became Camp Evans in 1941 to 45. It served during World War II. And then it was going to be closed, but it continued having to be a blacklist site or a secret site. And so it served through the Korean, Vietnam, Cold War. And finally, in 1993, they declared it excess and went through a process to which ended up as ours. But here's a shot of it at the end of World War II. And notice all those buildings. If you can see my cursor, only this is the Marconi building, these 2 cottages, and its power station. Everything else was built for World War II radar development. Okay, they made a lot of different radars. Here's some choices. And, you know, at the end of the war, radar was declared a major reason for victory. In published articles, it said that, the atomic bomb may have been more spectacular, but it was radar that got armies in the position that the atomic bomb would be effective. And what they couldn't say was the atomic bomb was set up with radar triggers to explode at the proper height. Okay. Now, part of the mission was to analyze the enemy's equipment. So over to the left, you see a German radar unit called the Würzburg that helped in anti-aircraft defense. Here's a V2 that was brought over the United States that we'll talk more about those. And here's another radar unit, a Würzburg Visa, which was brought over as war booty to the United States to be ready for our first satellite. But, oh no, Sputnik came along and changed everything. And the Germans had great radar and they used it effectively, but we outdid them by spoofing their own radar, by having a larger fleet appear on their radar than the attacking fleet attacking Normandy. So we were pretty darn good at radar, but they were best on rockets. Okay, and we had no countermeasure, right? We were fortunate that they were pushed back far enough that their rockets could not hit London anymore, okay? And then the war is over, but what do? Because look at how the world was divided up there. And the enemy of our enemy, who was our friend, the Soviet Union, now started to become our enemy, and the Cold War started. And one thing about being a victor is you can take what you wish, and war booty became different, okay? So we sent over teams, approximately 3,000 people, to go through Nazi Germany and find any technology, because we knew they were working on an atomic program. We knew they had chemical weapons. We, of course, knew that they had rockets and radar. And so they started a program, and they thought, well, why not bring the scientists too? Because you see over to the right, they were serious. This is a captured document that the mission got, and it's a targeting map for Manhattan. They thought, and they were working on making an American bomber. So could you imagine Manhattan being hit with an early atomic bomb or even a dirty bomb? The Atomic Bomb Corps, they had a lecturer at Princeton come in, and they got to pass around, or he passed around one of those little cubes of depleted uranium. And it was sort of fun holding one of those cubes encased in lucite in my hand. Now, they ended up getting 1,600 German scientists. In the beginning, one of the scientists I spoke to said, well, yeah, I was invited to the United States in handcuffs, okay? Another one said, yes, I was invited and made a very lucrative offer, and leaving war-torn Germany where everything was destroyed and there wasn't good paying jobs, and to go to the United States, of course I would go. But the funny thing is, it was a secret program, and the public was not told about it until the New York Times disclosed it. And there was some pushback. Albert Einstein even wrote to the president and said, no, this is bad. You should hold off bringing any Germans over to the US for at least 12 years so the Nazi ideology can die down. But it seemed like the controversy just faded away. So this group that we're going to talk about was not the first group of desirable Germans. The first Germans to be brought over to the United States were brought by their military sponsor, the British, and 6,000 of them stayed in the United States of the 30,000 deployed, and they played an interesting role in the United States. I'm related to one who was captured twice, made an indentured servant, and then when his time was up, he formed a little town in Pennsylvania called Fear Not, because he no longer had to fear war. This is an interesting group that got their citizenship through military service, but for the other guys. Okay, now, Operation Paperclip in history has a lost group, and one author who speaks of them calls them the best and the brightest. And the person who made the decision to select some of these persons offered to them by the Defense Department was Dr. Harold Zoll, the chief scientist of Camp Evans. And here's his plaque on our wall of honor. And here's a smattering of some of the scientists that we'll talk about. And whenever you get a book on Operation Paperclip or look on a YouTube video, they only want to talk about the stars. And the stars are Werner von Braun and his rocket men. And, you know, when we finally got to the moon, there was a joke by the comedian of Bob Hope, which maybe some of you will recognize. Why did American astronauts get to the moon before Soviet cosmonauts? Because our German scientists were better than their German scientists. And maybe that's true. Okay. And over the years, this group of scientists at Camp Evans in Fort Monmouth would make major contributions to many of the programs that advance United States military. And let's go take a look at one of the leaders of the class. This is Hans Ziegler, and he was brought over in, I think, 1952, and he was a rock star, and he was so far ahead of his times that it's questionable, have we caught up? Because here he is in 1954 giving a talk at a scientific event, and he's saying that we should put solar cells, or solar batteries that we now call solar cells, on top of the country's roofs and buildings, and that would eliminate our demand for new power systems. Well, here we are in 2022, and we haven't done that. Okay, now, as fate is sort of funny, an author of a book on let's see, space to Earth, right? John Perlin. I got to speak with him and met him thanks to Hans Ziegler, and he said, life is funny. Here I picked my thesis to come into to learn about how solar cells were put on military and space systems. And he goes, I'm a devout Jewish man, and the hero of my story becomes a Nazi. But they became friends, and now John is in charge of Hans Ziegler's papers. And John was kind enough to go through the papers and select things that related to his time at Fort Monmouth. And here's Hans Ziegler with the rock star Werner von Braun. Here is the solar cell satellite. And we have an actual satellite that wasn't launched, one of the Vanguard series, on display at Camp Evans in our, in our ISEC. And the one that was launched, there was a lot of politics involved. The chief contractor was the Navy, and they wanted nothing to do with this unproven solar cell technology, and they pushed against it and had no faith in it. So through politics, the Army got the authority, because they were responsible for tracking satellites. They got the authority over the Navy's objection to put the solar cell tracking beacon system on. And So after 3 months, when the Vanguard was launched, the chemical batteries for the main mission ran out of juice. But for 6 years, the solar cell driven tracking system went around the globe, leaving signals, I'm here, here I am. So that proved beyond doubt that solar cells were the future, and they still are the future. And have any of you gone to the park in Ocean Township, Palea Park? The tall white building in the middle once held the largest collection of satellite tracking data. And here's Hans Ziegler at that facility. Okay. The next well-known among nuclear circles is Dr. Stanley Cronenberg. And also on our Hall of Fame here, his plaque. There was only 2 buildings built at Camp Evans after World War II, because again, they were pretty much resigned that they were going to close it one day. So why build too many buildings other than needed for special purposes? The first one, 9400, was built to track Soviet or detect Soviet underground nuclear tests and report their location and strength to the Pentagon, and that worked well. The second was 9401, and here's a picture of it, and it was built for Dr. Stanley Cronenberg and others to house, this is not actually it, but a Van de Graaff generator to do particle acceleration. They put in a 25-foot deep cobalt-60 retainment pool, which when it came in, it had the strengths of 6,000 curies, and you could turn the lights out and read the New York Times from the light coming out of this pool, even though it was under 25 feet of water. And they also had an open air isotope manipulating facility where one used these remote control mechanical arms. You were protected by a 1.5 foot thick liquid bromide window. And this is what you saw when you looked in. And this, Dr. Cronenberg painted this, and a friend of his painted this on the back wall of the containment facility because it reminded them of a sarcophagus, so, or a burial chamber. So I don't remember how many patents he had in nuclear, but one of the most important things was the dosimeters that would warn our soldiers if they were in an area with nuclear isotopes or nuclear contamination. And Dr. Cronenberg was part of the teams that went to Nevada and then Bikini Atolls, and they helped set up the nuclear tests, and then previously had set up equipment to see what the atomic effects would be on signal core equipment. And they were the ones who discovered electromagnetic pulse, which is that burst of energy that comes from an atomic bomb that we worry that if there's ever going to be a nuclear attack, step one would be to ignite or detonate the bomb up in the upper atmosphere to disable all our satellites and communication systems. And at this facility, they would test components and experiment on how to shield them so our most important military systems could survive that initial electromagnetic pulse blast. Busy place, eh? And here's another Kurt Levesque, who I got to speak to. And the first thing he said is, even though those websites say I'm not a Nazi, I was never a Nazi. And that was his key thing. He was a giant in developing the integrated circuit, light emitting diodes, and lithium batteries. Okay. You know, that was his thing. Jokingly, we call him the father of LED Christmas lights. Okay. Here is Otto Rickenbach, also in our Hall of Fame. His inventions moved radar forward. And in the current conflict today, there is discussion and possibly some of these mortar locating firefinder radars may be made available to the Ukrainians. They really showed their prowess in battle during the Iraq War. One of the captured Iraqi soldiers is quoted as saying, "We couldn't use our artillery because then the return fire was raining steel." So, the United States has some awesome systems enabled by these German scientists and, of course, all the folks who worked with them. Okay. Another person, and this is Dr. Rudy Boozer, who, he sadly passed away. But if you've gone to funerals where the pastor or the rabbi says, I didn't know Sam or I didn't know Bob, but my friends tell me he was a good guy. Well, I actually got to spend time and have many a meal with some of the more recent Operation Paperclip scientists because, they missed their culture. They missed Germany. The German culture is wonderful. It's hard to see what happened in the 1930s, but it did. But the group would get together and they would have a cultural evening, Kulturabend, and Rudy was one of my Kulturabend Freund, and they had rules. And the rules were that the host had to have a program spoken in German and prepare a meal for the guests. And I got invited because I thought I could talk them into doing oral histories, which I was not successful, but they kept inviting me back. And, I couldn't really understand the programs, but little by little, I started to pick it up. But around the 7th or 8th time, I said, hey, it's my turn to do a program. I'm going to be the host next time. And being sort of frank, one of them goes, Fred, we know you. You can't cook and you don't speak German, right? So I said, I got a plan. So they all ate at a local German restaurant in Bradley Beach called Schneider's. The owner knew every single one of them and what their favorite meal was. So he set me up. So he was my cook and had everything ready for me. We had the dinner at Camp Evans. And previously I had gone on Amazon Germany and got a selection of native German films to show. And I selected one called Now or Never about a number of folks in a nursing home who decided it was now or never. Let's go rob some banks and have some fun. And I created a cue card thanks to a friend who actually spoke German. And when it was time for the program, I read from the card and said, well, here I am supposed to do a presentation or teach a class in a subject area that I have no knowledge. So I'm going to use the tried and true method of a substitute teacher. I'm going to show a film. And it went over good. The second time I couldn't get away with that. So here we are. Dr. Zoll wrote 2 books. One of it is Electrons Away. And in it, he talks about what a wonderful experience it was to see our melting pot in action. And he says that, there's thousands of children, brilliant children in our school. And surely this country is better and stronger because of that decision by a few men more than many decades ago. So United States is blessed with this program. Initially, it was to blunt the Soviets from getting German scientists, but then after a while, it became a program of cherry picking European science. And many of those cherries ended up at Fort Monmouth and Camp Evans. And even though this group is sort of overlooked and lost in the popular history of Operation Paperclip, they are truly the best and the brightest. So one more thing, a chance to do a little commercial here, because if this was a YouTube video, you need to visit Camp Evans. It is an amazing place, and many hundreds of people like Melissa have worked to make wonderful exhibits and museums. And this one place that an article in 1993 said was most likely going to fade into oblivion is now an active and growing science history center. Camp Evans is not bulldozed. It is a 37-acre, 16-building landmark with a giant 60-foot telescope, which can now help Princeton students learn about pulsars. So it's more than wonderful, and I'd like to turn the screen back to questions.
All right, thank you so much, Fred. One thing I hate about the virtual environment is we can't give the most rousing applause, but I'm certainly applauding for you over here. That was just so fascinating. And I think the fact that we were able to look at the experience of both uniformed military and then the civilians working for the military too gives a real interesting depth to the panel. So for those in our audience, if you'd like to type a question for either Carol or Fred in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, I would be happy to read that question for you. While they're typing, Fred, I had never heard the Bob Hope quote before about how our German scientists were better than their German scientists. So that gave me a little laugh. Again, I'm watching the box, so whenever there's a question, I will go ahead and read it. Fred, this one's for you. How thoroughly did the United States vet these men's backgrounds before they came over? Were they, very concerned about what they had done in the war?
They did it first, but it appears that things were whitewashed because they were so desirous of getting their talent and their knowledge that they sort of went over the line of, I guess, international morality. Okay. And it wasn't controversial at first, but then it seemed to become controversial in the late 60s and 70s when the Nazi war criminal effort came more into the public eye. So yeah, it's sort of sad, but here we go. But again, the later scientists were like Dr. Cronenberg. He was, I think, 14 when he was inducted into the German army. And after surviving a battle of which he was one of the few living bodies, he walked home and then when the war was over, finished his education. So he was a cherry that was picked when he came out of university. And some of the late ones were.
14, my goodness. Here's a question from the Q&A box from Maxine for Fred. Why was it called Operation Paperclip? And did any of them eventually return to Germany?
It first was called Operation Overcast. And then as they had those files where they were vetting it to a degree, trying to find out were these people involved in concentration camps or other experiments that killed people. Those that they were interested in, they put a paperclip on their file. So that is the urban legend of how the program or the operation got its name. Okay, and some did go back, because American culture is different than German culture. And then some, when they retired, went back because, you know, they wanted to be with their original families of grandchildren and things like that, if they came later in life when they didn't bring their whole family.
Fred, I have to say, even as the last command historian from Fort Monmouth prior to the base closure, I didn't know that was where the name came from. There's always so many things to research. I didn't know that was where the name came from. So I'm learning a lot today along with our audience. Here's a question in the box from Twyla. Fred, is any of the work of the immigrant scholars and scientists still classified or released now for students to study the history and learn about the military background still in existence today?
Well, I would imagine some of the work is still classified, but thanks to some of the families of some of the German scientists, we have in our InfoAge archives some of the papers of the German scientists that we have yet to adequately categorize and study. So that's sort of an invitation because this, again, is an overlooked and understudied group. And I honestly wouldn't know where to start with the documentation to look, because this is personal documents. But at the National Archives, there are listed some of the files of the 1600, and it has a call number for them. But that's as far as I've researched it. I don't know if there's a HIPAA for German scientists, you know, so that's it.
Thanks, Fred. Okay, this is for Carol. Carol, you have done some 600 oral history interviews.
Wow.
Do you ever hear immigrant narrators talk about whether the military accommodates or does not accommodate different cultural and religious traditions?
I would say everything's respected, especially in the modern age. In World War II, there was discrimination against cultural differences, religious differences. But nowadays, we've come a long way, especially with the integration of females in the service, and things have gotten a lot better. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Carol. Okay. Other questions from our audience? Okay. Well, I'm really struck by Carol, your narrators seem, and it may just be these two, or perhaps you can comment on whether most immigrant narrators feel very positive about their experience. They seem just bursting with pride about the fact that they were serving this country that had become their new home. And Fred, I don't know, did you see that from the scientists? Were they always kind of pining for Germany, or do you, in their memoirs, their testimony, see some expression of pride that they wound up here and that they were making such incredible contributions?
The answer is yes, on the pride of accomplishments. When I got to spend some time talking with Hans Ziegler, he gave me an autographed postcard of the up and coming book on the one about solar cells in space. And I noted that a lot of pride in their work, and because they had a successful attitude when they came here, especially the first wave of them who were involved with the World War II Germany, was they were going to make the best of this situation. And they were going to put their background sort of behind them. And for the most part, they did successfully.
Did you want me to also speak about that?
Yeah, Carol, if you'd like to comment on that, please go ahead. Do you genuinely usually see this excitement amongst most of your immigrant narrators?
Yes, I would say yes. And I also see it with those who signed up after the attacks from 9/11, 2001. Like you heard Colonel Alvarado say, he worked in recruiting and retention, and he even had Vietnam veterans signing up who wanted to get into the fight, which I honestly had not ever heard that.
Mm. Okay, well, I don't see any other questions from the audience. Oh, wait, maybe here's one. Twyla says, thanks for the panel discussions and oral interviews of the soldiers, great American history. Before we wrap, Fred, Carol, is there any last comment you'd like to make?
Thank you, Melissa, because if you didn't invite me to this, the material would still be all over the place. So thank you for giving me a deadline.
We thank the Historical Commission for that. Carol, any last closing remarks?
I'm very grateful as well, Melissa, for being included with this topic. I learned things as well, and I truly enjoyed revisiting those two oral histories and bringing up their best bits and having them made into montages for today's presentation. So
Awesome.
I'm really proud of that, and I'm glad to be here, and thank you to everyone who joined us today.
Awesome. And I will just, again, in case you came in late, thank Carrie Giannotti, who is the museum educator at the New Jersey Vietnam Veterans Memorial Foundation, and originally conceived of this panel, but then could not be with us because of a scheduling conflict. So thank you, Fred. Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Historical Commission. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. Now, I believe there is one more panel this evening. So hop off with us and go get on that one. Have a great night, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Bye.
You too.